Hello ladies and gentle ladies, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for Fabric 1.21. And in this tutorial we are going to be adding a wood set so that in the next tutorial we can actually create a custom tree. So unfortunately wood sets are quite complicated, so this tutorial is probably going to be quite long, so just a heads up. So let's get started straight away. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and register all of our blocks, and there are lots of blocks that we need to register in a wood set. So we will start off with the log, so that is going to be a public static final. Now this will just be a normal block, that's perfectly fine, and this is going to be our example underscore log, which is going to be equal to register with item. We're going to give it example underscore log, and then for the actual log we're going to use blocks.create log block, and we need to pass in the map color. So I know my log is going to be terracotta light blue, and then we're also going to have map color dot white. So effectively this first map color will be the top color, and then the other map color will be the side color. These don't really matter too much, it's just the color that will show up on the map. So you can obviously look through these and use whichever one is the closest to what you want, but these are going to be perfectly fine for me. Then we're going to need to do the exact same thing for the stripped log. I should also note that in this create log block there is an overload that will allow you to take in a block sound group, which is for example used for the never logs. So you can choose to do that if you wish. I'm not going to go into that, but if you wish to do that then you can. Just note there are lots of things you could do with these things that we're going to create in this tutorial. I'm not going to cover all of those because that would make this tutorial hours long, and that's not my intention. So we're just going to cover the basic things, and you can do anything else that you want to do. So then we're going to need to create the wood blocks as well. So we're going to go pretty much exactly the same thing somewhat. So we're going to create another block. This is going to be example underscore wood, and that is going to be equal to register. Now we're not going to register an item for this one because of course the wood is never found in the creative menu, and this will be a new pillar block, and this is going to take in abstract block dot settings dot create, and then we can provide some properties on here which will just be your normal properties, whichever ones you want to set. I'm just going to set some basic ones that we're going to want. So we're going to want the map color, instrument, the strength, the sounds, and whether or not it is burnable, which in our case it is burnable. And then we're also going to want a strip variant, so I'm just going to copy this. The next thing that we are going to want is going to be the leaves. So I will note straight away with the leaves, we're just going to be using a leaves block, but you should know that the leaves block only has a maximum distance of 7. So if you do intend to have a tree with a large set of leaves, you're going to need to create your own leaves block class. Now I'm not going to show you how to do that because once again that would take a long time to go through, but effectively you would just be copy pasting this, and you might also need to do something with the logs. You'll need to look into that and see exactly how you want to do that. We're going to be fine with using the 1 to 7, so we're just going to keep that, but do keep that in note that possibly that won't work for you. And this will just be register with item, and we're going to use example underscore leaves. Then in here for the leaves block we're going to want all of the properties. Now there's tons of properties that you need for leaves. I actually don't think this piston behavior is correct, but I have that in my test mod, so I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. You may need to look into that. I'm going to leave it there, but you can have a look yourself. The next thing we're going to want to do is the sapling. Now this is going to be quite complicated since we're going to need to provide a sapling generator here, but we will do that later. So we will just go over a public static final block, which will be our example underscore sapling, and in fact we can call this a sapling block, that's perfectly fine. And we're going to set that to be register with item example underscore sapling, just the usual stuff, and we're going to provide a new sapling block. Now you'll see that the first parameter for this is going to be the sapling generator. For now we are going to pass in null but do note that we are going to be changing this in the next tutorial. So don't forget to come back and change that, otherwise that's going to cause you some issues. Then we're just going to do the block properties again. So I'm just going to copy paste these in from my test mod, but you can go and mess around with those however you like, and that will be perfectly fine. Next, we're going to want the planks. So that's just going to be a normal block, nothing special with the planks. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to do is the door, which should be relatively simple. So we're going to say a public static final door block, and this is going to be example underscore door, which is going to be equal to register with item example underscore door. Then we're going to provide this with a new door block. Now this is going to need to take in a block set type. For now, once again, we are just going to pass null, but we will come back later in this tutorial to come and fix that, since we are going to need to make sure we do set that. Then we're going to want to do the properties. Once again, I'm just going to copy paste these in so you can mess around with the properties, but with the map color here, you can set a map color if you want. However, I am actually just going to grab that from the planks. Next, we are going to want the fence. So we're going to have a fence block, which will be example underscore fence. And once again, we're going to register with an item, example underscore fence. So most of this is going to be exactly the same, but there are some things we will need to come back and change later. So we're going to want a new fence block. And once again, same as usual, I'm just going to copy the properties in. Do make sure that you are setting the properties on all of these to the correct kind of thing. Otherwise, you are going to have some niche problems. Next, we are going to want the fence gate. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy the fence, and we're going to change this to a fence gate. We are actually going to need to change a few more things than that. So we are going to want example fence gate, and then we're going to pass in null as the first parameter there. And once again, make sure you set your properties on that one. Next, we're going to want the stairs, which for the most part is just going to be a normal block, but it will be slightly different. So we're going to have a stairs block, which will be our example underscore stairs. We're once again going to register with an item, which will be example underscore stairs as the name. Then we're going to want a new stairs block. Now, first of all, this is going to need to take in our planks. So we're going to say example underscore planks, and we're going to call get default state. And then we are going to need to provide the properties. So I'm just going to copy the properties from the oak stairs. So I'm going to say abstract block dot settings dot copy, and I'm going to say blocks dot oak underscore stairs, and then all I'm going to do is just set the map color on that, and that is going to use our example planks dot get map color. The next thing we're going to want is the slab. So we're going to have a public static final. This will be a slab block, and we're going to say example underscore slab, and we're going to equal register with item example underscore slab, and inside of here we're just going to pass in the properties, and once again your map color will need to copy from your planks. Next, what we are going to do is the pressure plate. So this will just be a pressure plate block, and we're going to call this example underscore pressure underscore plate. Once again, register with item example underscore pressure underscore plate, and what we're going to do in here is we're going to do a new pressure plate block. Once again, we're going to pass in null as the first parameter, because that will be our block set type, which we'll create later. And then we're going to want the properties. Then after the pressure plate, we are obviously going to do the button. So this will just be a block, and this will be example underscore button, which will be, once again, register with item. And we're just going to call this example underscore button. Then we are going to just call blocks.create wooden button block, and we're going to pass in null for the block set type. Then let's go ahead and do the trapdoor as well. So we'll do a public static final. This will be a trapdoor block, and we're going to call this example underscore trapdoor, which will be equal to register with item example trapdoor, and we're going to do a new trapdoor block. This is first going to take in null for our block set type, and then it's going to need to take in the properties. Now the final thing that we need to do is going to be the signs, and we're also going to need to register the boat as well. So these are actually going to be a little more complicated, and we could do this ourselves. However, we're actually going to use a library that will do this for us. And the reason is because if we don't, then we're going to have to write a ton of mix-ins, and it gets really complicated, and this tutorial would probably be another 2 hours longer just doing those things alone. So we're going to use a library, and this library isn't too hefty, so don't worry about that. But we're going to come into our build.gradle file here, and in the dependencies block, we're going to call mod implementation, and we're going to go terraformers mc .terraform API terraform wood API v1. And then we're going to do colon, and we're going to say $ and open your curly braces, and we're going to say project.terraform _wood API _version, like that. Then let's go ahead and copy this little string here, and inside of our gradle.properties, we're going to add that in the dependencies section. And what we're going to set this to is whatever the latest version is. Now for me, the latest version is 11.0.0-alpha.1. However, you can go ahead and check the link in the description, and that will link to what the latest version should be. You'll be able to see the full list of versions, and you're just going to want the latest one for 1.21. And for me, that is 11.0.0-alpha.1. After we have done that, there is a line that we do need to go ahead and add inside of our Loom block to reconfigure Loom for the Datagen. So we're going to add runs, and inside of here, we're going to add the Datagen, and inside of that, we're going to put inherit client. The other thing that we will need to do is just move our Fabric API configure Datagen above the Loom block, because otherwise that will conflict with our Datagen configuration in here. If you don't understand this, don't worry about it too much. It's not too bad to worry about, but just do that and that should be fine. Then finally, all we need to do is add this as a Maven repository. So we're going to come into our repositories block, and we're going to add a Maven. The name of this Maven will just be the Terraformers MC, and then the URL is going to be equal to that URL there. So that is maven.terraformersmc.com/. And obviously, if you go to this site, you should be able to see basically all of the releases. So you can come into here, and we can say terraformers MC, and we can look into here. So for the Terraform API, and then we can go into the Wood API, and you see here that the latest for me is 11.0.0-alpha.1. And then what we can go ahead and do is hit this little elephant reload button. If you don't have that for whatever reason, you can come into your Gradle tab on the right, and we can just reload. Remember, if you don't have the Gradle tab on the right, then you can come up to View, Tool Windows, and you just want to go down to Gradle. Wherever that is, I can't see it actually. It's there it is, and that will open this up. So we're just going to reload, and hopefully that will be fine. If for whatever reason that's not fine and something goes wrong, which is possible, we're actually going to watch, because when I did this in my test mod, it actually didn't work first try. So if it doesn't work, what you'll want to do is open your terminal window, or Alt F12, and we're going to type /gradlew and then clean. And what that will do is that will clean your Gradle dependencies, and then you can go ahead and reload that again, and hopefully that should work that time. It looks like for me it has just worked first try, so we don't have to go ahead and worry about that. Okay, so with that done, we can go ahead and now register our signs first of all. So we're going to go with a public static final. This will be a Terraform sign block, and we're going to call this example_sign. This is just going to be equal to register. We're not going to register an item for this. We're going to do that manually later. This will be an example_sign. We're going to set this to a new Terraform sign block. This is first going to want a texture location. So for now, we're just going to pass in null, but we'll create that in a second. And then we're just going to want our block settings as well. So let's put those in there. And effectively, we're going to do the same for the wall sign and the hanging sign and the hanging wall sign. So I'm just going to quickly do that, and I'll show you the differences. Now note that for the hanging signs, you are going to need to pass in 2 nulls. So you're going to have the texture and then the GUI texture after that. And then that will be the same for the wall hanging sign as well. So that's just using the sign block there, the wall sign block there, the hanging sign block there, and then the wall hanging sign block there. Now once we have done that, we can go ahead and create these texture locations. So this should be fairly simple. So we're just going to come just above our signs here, and we're going to go with a private static final identifier. This will be the example underscore sign underscore texture, which will be equal to tutorial mod.id. And in here, we're going to pass in entity / signs / example. Then we're going to need to do the hanging sign texture as well. So this is going to be pretty much exactly the same. So I'm going to copy paste it, and I'm going to call this example hanging sign texture. And instead of entity signs example, we're just going to want entity signs / hanging / example. And then finally, we're going to want the GUI texture as well. So I'm going to copy paste the hanging one, and we're going to say hanging sign underscore GUI underscore texture, which it will be in textures / GUI / hanging underscore signs. And once again, that will be called example. Okay, then we can go ahead and pass these in. So I'm just going to put the example sign texture in the first 2. Then I'm going to put the hanging one in the second 2. Then I'm going to put the hanging GUI one for both of these nulls there. Then once we've gone ahead and done that, we can now move into our item init, and we can go ahead and actually register these sign items. So we're going to come all the way to the bottom, and we're going to go with a public static final sign item. And we're going to call that example underscore sign, which will be equal to register example underscore sign. This will be a new sign item, and inside of here we're going to want our properties. So we're going to want a new item.settings, which will have a max count of 16, and then we're going to need to pass in our sign block and our wall sign block. So we're going to say block init dot example sign, and then block init dot example wall sign. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for the hanging sign. So we're going to have a hanging sign item, which is going to be example hanging sign, which will be equal to register example hanging sign. Then we're going to have a new hanging sign item. Now this is going to take in the blocks first, so I don't know why it's the other way around here, but it is. So we're going to say block init dot example hanging sign, and then block init dot example wall hanging sign, and then it's going to be the properties, so a new item dot settings. Once again, we're going to say a max count of 16. There we go. So that should be most of the things registered. However, we are going to want the boats as well. Now luckily the Wood API does help us out with that as well, so we can do a public static final, and this will be an item. I'm going to call this example underscore boat. Now this will not be using our registry method here. We're actually going to use the Terraform boat item helper, and then we are going to call register boat item. In here we are going to need to pass in an identifier. Now for this I'm going to use a boat init dot example underscore boat underscore ID, which we haven't created yet, but we'll create that in a second. And then we're going to use boat init dot example underscore boat underscore key, and we'll create both of those in a second. And then we're going to need to pass in false, which is whether or not this is a chest boat. Now if you wish to have any special settings on this, you can also pass in settings as a 4th parameter, but we're not going to have any settings, so we'll just use that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to want the chest boat, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this. I'm going to call this example underscore chest underscore boat, and then I'm going to say chest is true. Okay, now before we go ahead and create this boat in it, let's go ahead and create our BlockSetType, so that is done and dusted and we don't have to worry about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into our list package. We're going to create a new class, and we're just going to call this the BlockSetType list. And inside of here we're going to create a public static final. This will be a BlockSetType, and I'm going to call this example. That will be equal to a new BlockSetType, where we're going to use our ID method here. So we're going to say tutorial mod.id and we're just going to pass in example as the name, and then we're just going to need to say .toString. Now you'll see here that there is also an overload which you can use, and that will just allow you to provide special sound events and activation rules and all those kind of things for your different blocks. But we're not going to be using that, so we don't have to worry about it. Then let's go ahead and reference this inside of our block init to get rid of some of those nulls. So let's go all the way from the top, and we'll go through one by one to make sure that we don't miss any. So we're going to go through here. Now we're going to leave this null for the sapling generator, but for this one we're going to say BlockSetType list.example, and I'm just going to copy that, and then we're going to need that in the fence gate as well, in the pressure plate, the wooden button, and also the trap door. Okay, so that has got rid of all of those. It looks like the fence gate actually didn't want that, so we're going to need to create the WoodType list. So let's go into our list package again. We're going to create a new class, and we're going to call this WoodType list. Inside of here we're going to want a public static final WoodType, which will be our example, and this will be equal to a new WoodType. Now inside of here we're going to use tutorialMod.id once again, which will be of example, and we're going to say .toString. Then we're going to need to reference our BlockSetType, so we're going to say BlockSetType list.example. Then we're going to need the sound group, so we're going to say BlockSoundGroup, and I'm going to use wood. Then we're going to use the block sound group again, and this will be for the hanging sign, so I'm just going to say the hanging sign sound group. Then we're going to want a sound event for the fence gate close and the fence gate open. So we're going to say sound events dot block fence gate close and then block fence gate open. Okay, perfect. So now we can go ahead into our block init again, and we can use WoodType list.example. Okay, so that was gotten rid of all of our things in here. So we can now go ahead and actually close the block init, and we can come back to that in the next tutorial for the tree generator. Now what we need to do is create our boat init. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to come into our init package, create a new class, boat init. And inside of here, we're going to want our init method as usual. So I'm going to create a public static void load. And then we're also going to want a registry method. So we're going to have a public static, and this will be a Terraform boat type. We'll call this method register. This is going to first take in a registry key of type Terraform boat type, which will be the key. And then it's just going to want the actual Terraform boat type, which will be the type. Going to make sure we import registry key there. And all we're going to do in here is return registry.register. And we're going to say Terraform boat type registry.instance. We're going to pass in the key, and then we're going to pass in the type. Next, we need to go ahead and create the identifier for the boat and also the chest boat. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to want a public static final. We're going to have the example boat underscore ID here, which will be equal to tutorialmod.id. And that will be the example underscore boat. And that is an identifier, by the way, which I almost forgot there. Then we're going to want the exact same thing for the chest boat, and then we're also going to want the registry key. So we're going to go ahead and do a public static final registry key of type Terraform boat type, which will be the example boat key, and that'll be equal to Terraform boat type registry dot create key, and then we're going to pass in the actual boat ID as well. Now, one thing that you do need to go ahead and do in your item init is you do actually need to make sure that these are both using the chest ones for the chest boat. So I actually forgot to create the chest key as well, so we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. So we're going to say example chest boat key, example chest boat, like that. And then we're going to call this register method as well. So we're going to go with a public static final Terraform boat type, which will be the example underscore type, and that'll be equal to register. Now, my mistake, it looks like we actually don't need this chest boat key, so we can go ahead and remove that and revert that back in here. So we're going to see example boat key. There we go. So we actually don't need that because we need to reference the example key inside of here. Then we're going to want a new Terraform boat type.builder, and on this builder we are first going to say the item, which will be item init dot example underscore boat. Then we're going to say the chest item is going to be item init dot example chest boat. Then we are going to say that the planks is going to be our block init dot example planks, and we're going to need to call as item on that to get that as an item. Then if you want this to be a raft, you need to call .raft on this, but we don't want that in this specific circumstance, so we can just go ahead and call build. Then we're going to make sure we are calling load inside of our main class, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say boat init.load. Now that will be pretty much it for the registries. The only kind of final thing that we need to do in the code here is we need to come into our tag list and we need to create a tag for our logs. So we're going to go with a public static class, which will be the items, and we're going to want a public static final tag key of type item, which will be our example underscore logs, which is going to be equal to tag key dot of registry keys dot item, and we're going to pass in tutorial mod dot id example underscore logs. So we can now go ahead and do all of the data gen. Now the data gen is quite complicated, so we're going to go through these one by one. We're going to start with the loot tables. So I'm just going to create a little bit of spacing here. We're going to start with the logs, since those are going to be super simple. There's just going to be normal block drops. Then we can go ahead and do the leaves, which will be leaves drops. So we're going to say block init dot example underscore leaves. Then we're going to pass in the sapling, so we're going to say block init dot example sapling, and then we're going to need to provide the sapling drop chance as well. So for that we can actually just use sapling drop chance, which is something from the parent class. You can go ahead and look at that if you want. If you want to provide your own chances, then of course you can go ahead and do that. And then for all of the rest, we're just going to do the add drop. Now for the signs, this is actually going to be a little bit different. So we're going to need to call add drop. We're going to pass in the sign, so we're going to say block init dot example sign, and then we are just going to say item init dot example sign, and we're going to need to do that for the wall sign as well. And then we're going to need to do the hanging ones, which is going to be effectively the exact same here. So that is the loot tables done. Then we can go ahead and use the block tags provider. So this is actually going to be very long, and there's a bunch of things that we need to go ahead and add inside of here. First of all, we're going to start with the log tags. So we're going to say block tags.log. Now we are actually going to create a tag key for our logs in here as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go into our tag list, and inside of the blocks, we're going to create one here. So we're going to go with a public static final tag key of type block. This is going to be for example underscore logs, and we're going to say tag key dot of registry keys dot block, and we're going to say tutorial mod dot id example underscore log. So effectively exactly the same as our item tag, except it's going to be for the block. And then what we'll need to do is we'll just say tag list dot blocks, and we're going to say example logs. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to add all of our logs to this. So we're going to need to say block init dot example log. We're going to say block init dot stripped example log, and then we're also going to add our woods in here as well. So we're going to say block init dot example wood, and we're also going to say block init dot strip example wood. Then we need to go ahead and add our example logs into the logs that burn tag, since our wood is going to be flammable. If your wood is not flammable, then you'll just add it to the normal logs tag. So we're going to say get or create tag builder. We're going to say block tags dot logs that burn, and then we're just going to call add tag, and we're going to say tag list dot blocks dot example logs. Then we can go ahead and do the leaves. So we're going to say get or create tag builder. We're going to say block tags dot leaves, and then we're going to add block init dot example leaves. Then we're going to basically do the exact same thing for all of the rest. So I'm just going to go ahead and create these, and I'll be back with you once they are done. Okay, so that is all of those added. You'll see these are all fairly normal. So you've got wooden buttons, you've got wooden doors, wooden trapdoors, wooden fences, wooden pressure plates, wooden slabs, wooden stairs, standing signs, wall signs, ceiling hanging signs, and then wall hanging signs. So with all of those done, we can go ahead and close our block tag provider, and we can open our item tag provider, since we're going to need to add a bunch of these to item tags so that they all work in recipes and alike. So first of all, let's create the tag for our logs that we had. So let's do create tag builder, and we're going to say tag list dot items, and we're going to say dot example logs. And then we're just going to go ahead and add all of the ones in here. And you'll see that we do have to call as item on these to get these as an actual item. Then we're going to add this to the logs that burn tag. So we're going to say get create tag builder, and we're going to say item tags dot logs that burn. And we're just going to add our tag list dot items dot example logs. Now, once again, if your logs do not burn, then you're going to need to add them to the normal logs tag instead. Then the same as with the blocks, we're going to add them to all the other tags as well. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and do that. And you need to make sure you add your boats in this one as well. So we just got the normal ones. We've got leaves, saplings, planks, wooden doors, wooden fences, fence gates, wooden stairs, wooden slabs, wooden pressure plates, wooden trapdoors, wooden buttons, signs, hanging signs, boats, and chest boats. The next thing that we can go ahead and do will be our lang. So this is once again going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually copy paste these in, since there isn't really anything special about this. Okay, so that is all of those done. So we can now move into the model provider. Now the model provider is actually going to require a little bit of extra work than everything else. So first of all, inside of our generate block state models, we're just going to create a little bit of a gap there, and we're going to call block state model generator dot register log. Inside of here, we're going to pass in our log. So we're going to say block init dot example log. Then we're going to call .log, and inside of that we're going to once again pass in our log, so example log. Then we're going to say the .wood will be blockinit.example wood. Then we're going to need to do the exact same thing for the strip. So then we're going to need to do the leaves. So we're going to say block state model generator dot register simple cube all, and I'm just going to say block init dot example leaves. Then for the sapling, we're going to say block state model generator dot register tintable cross, and we'll call block init dot example sapling. And then for the tint type, we're just going to say tint type dot not tinted, since our sapling is not going to be tinted. Next, we are going to need to do the hanging sign. So we're going to say block state model generator dot register hanging sign. We're first going to pass in our stripped log, so we're going to say block init dot stripped example log, and then we're going to say block init dot example hanging sign, and then block init dot example wall hanging sign. Next, we are going to need to create a block family. So we're going to call this example family, and that will be equal to a new block family dot builder. This is first going to take in our example planks, and then we are going to need to call all of these builder methods for each of our blocks. Now you'll see for the sign, you do just need to pass in the wall sign as well. Once you've done all those though, we can do the group, which will just be the wooden group. And then for the unlock criterion name, we're just going to say has underscore planks. And then we're just going to call dot build. Once we've created our family, we can just call block state model generator dot register cube all model texture pool. And in here, we're going to pass in the base block of our family. So we're just going to call example family dot get base block. And then we're going to call dot family and say our example family. Then we do need to go ahead and register the item models for our boats. The final thing that we need to go ahead and do will be all of our recipes. Now this is once again going to be quite a lot of stuff, so I'm not really going to go through this. So I'm actually just going to once again copy paste this from my test mod, and we'll go through it very briefly in a second. Okay, so starting from the top, you'll see that we have the plank recipe from the logs here. So you'll see that takes in all of our log blocks there, and then it takes in the criterion for each of these. One thing I have actually just noticed, instead of using of items here, we can actually use from tag, and we could pass in our tag from our item tags in here. So we could actually say, instead of that, we could say tag list dot items dot example logs, and that will actually simplify that a little bit, so that's nice. And likewise, we can then actually do that for our condition here as well. So we can say has tag, and we can say tag list dot items dot example logs, and then we can call conditions from tag list dot items dot example logs. Then you have your slab in here, so you just do that normally. Then you have your stairs, you have the fence, which we're using the conventional item tags dot wooden rods for instead of sticks, of course. Then we have the fence gate as well. You have your door, you have your trap door, you have your button, your pressure plate, your signs, you have your hanging signs, your transportation for the boat and the chest boat. And then finally, we do need to create this family again. So let's just quickly go back into our model generator. I'm going to copy this family here. We're going to create it again. And all we're just going to call is generate family. We're going to pass in the exporter. We're going to pass in our example family, and then finally we're just going to pass in feature set.empty. So that should go ahead and generate all of those JSONs that we're going to need. So we can go ahead and just do run Datagen, and hopefully this should all be good. So you will see here that I actually do have an issue, and it's basically saying that it requires fabric rendering v1. Now, in theory, this should have been fixed by us moving this up here and then also adding this little block in here. So that does fix it. However, it will not have actually updated our task in here. So what we could go ahead and do is go ahead and just invalidate our project, and we can say file, invalidate caches, and if we go ahead and actually invalidate and restart, hopefully that should go ahead and just invalidate our Datagen run, and then we should be able to run it and it should work. So if we now go ahead and run the Minecraft Datagen configuration, hopefully that should work. If that doesn't work, there is another solution, and that is to come into your Gradle tab here into the fabric block, and we can actually just directly do the run Datagen task in here. So we'll see whether or not this works. You see my indexes are still updating, but that shouldn't really be an issue. So you'll see that that did actually work this time. Okay, so that has completed, and you'll see that has written a whopping 152 JSON files, which you can obviously go ahead and look at in here. So all of your JSON files for all of those should be created as long as you did it right. The final thing that we need to go ahead and do though is we need to go ahead and actually add all of our textures. Okay, so I have gone ahead and added all of my textures in here. So first all of the block textures in here, then all of the boat textures. So entity boat will be our example boat, entity chest underscore boat will be our example chest boat as well. So you'll just see that that is the chest boat texture. Then you have the signs. So inside there you have the hanging sign, and then you have the normal sign. Then in the GUI you also have a hanging signs package, which is your hanging sign for the GUI. And then obviously you have all of your item textures that you need to add as well. Okay, so with all of those done, we should now be able to go ahead and run the Minecraft client, and hopefully after all of that, everything should work. Okay, so you'll see that that has actually not worked, and that is because we forgot to do something very important, and we forgot to register our layers for our boats. So we need to go ahead and stop that, and we also need to do some other things as well. So inside of our client source set and Java, we're going to come into our tutorial mod client class, and we're going to need to add some things to our cutout here. So if you don't have this already, you just need to do block render layer map.instance.put blocks, and you're going to put that in render layer.cutout, and then here is just a list of blocks we're going to put in there. So we're also going to want to go ahead and add our door. So we're going to say block init.example door. We're also going to add our sapling. So we're going to say block init init.example sapling. We're also going to say block init.example leaves, and we're also going to say block init.example trapdoor, since those should be all of the blocks that are going to have any kind of transparency in them. After that, we're going to need to use the model layers. So I'm just going to say model layers, and I'm going to say here that this is the block render layers, which just helps to keep these separated, because we're going to add more things in here in the future as well. So inside of the model layers, we're just going to say Terraform boat client helper dot register model layers. We're going to use boat init dot example boat ID, and we're just going to say false because this is not a raft. However, if this is a raft, then you'll need to just pass in true for that. Okay, after that has completed, we should be able to run the game again, and hopefully it should work this time and we shouldn't get any errors. One thing I did forget to mention, that for some of the recipes in here, I am also using some other tags. So you'll see that here, for example, for the example hanging signs, I'm using the conventional item tags.chains for the chain there instead of items.chain, and then also for the chests here, I'm using the conventional item tags.wooden chests to go ahead and do that. Now, one thing I have seen in the log here is that apparently we need to go ahead and translate our item tags. Now, I was not aware of this, however, it's fairly simple to do. So we can go ahead into our translation builder here, and we can add tag list.items.example logs, and we can just call this example logs, which is nice and simple really. Now, you'll also see here that we have a packet error when we try to load the game, which I'm actually not sure currently what's causing that, but it seems to say that an empty item stack is not allowed. Now, I'm not sure specifically which recipe this is talking about, so I'm just going to kind of go through these, and I'm going to have a look to see if I can figure out why it thinks that's happening. Alright, so after God knows how long of looking through all of these recipes, I found out the issue is actually with the tag. So it's basically saying that Minecraft Air is added in here, and I know why. I've finally figured out why. So if we go into our provider here, into our item tag provider, you'll see that we are adding our wood as item and our stripped wood as item. But you may remember in our block init, we didn't register an item with these. So we actually don't want to add those to this tag, and effectively that should fix it. So when we rerun Datagen and we go back into the game, everything should be fine. So inside of the game, you can see that everything actually works perfectly fine as well. So the signs all work, and you can go ahead and edit those as well, and you'll see it brings up the correct screen. And also the doors obviously all work, the trap doors work, the fence gates all work, all of those kind of things. And yeah, that's it. So I think actually the door loot table is slightly broken, so maybe we can go ahead and look at that real quick. But everything else looks to be perfectly fine. You can also see, by the way, that the boats are fine, just to make sure. And obviously the chest boat as well. So we should be able to open that. It looks like we actually can't open that. Okay, so it looked like the game actually crashed when I also tried to middle click it, which is obviously not ideal. So for some reason, it's not actually correctly registering this. So I'm actually just going to quickly look into the docs and kind of read through, and I'll see if I can figure something out. All right, so I have taken a look into the kind of things that go on here, and what it looks like, and also we shouldn't be able to do this, but what it looks like is that this is actually not implemented in Terraform, and we can't really do that ourselves, or not easily anyways. So what we'll do is we'll leave that to the mixin tutorial, which will have to come sooner than I intended, and we'll go ahead and actually do that ourselves instead. So it should be that's also not right. So there's a few things we'll be fixing in the mixin tutorial by the looks of it. So yeah, that's good to know. Oh, also something happened there. What even just happened? So that looks to just be an issue with our sapling, because we haven't created the tree yet. So yeah, there are a few things that are still going to be wrong, and hopefully we should be able to remedy some of those in the next tutorial, and then also in the mixin tutorial, which I suppose I will be doing next week then. So yeah, I will get around to looking into fixing those. It's a bit annoying that Terraform doesn't cover those, but it is what it is, and there isn't really anything that we can do about that. You see that they're mixing into the boat entity here. It doesn't actually cover the as item method, and then also that's the reason that you can't open the menu as well, because that requires the item for whatever reason. As for why the boats break instantly, I'm actually not sure. I'll have to look into that as well, but I'm sure that's something we can fix with a mix-in as well. So yeah, there's a few things we'll have to do. We're also going to add the entity to some tags as well, so we'll do that through mix-ins too. But yeah, I hope you guys found this tutorial useful and you enjoyed it. If you did, please do be sure to give us a like and subscribe. I know this has been a long tutorial, but there are a lot of things that we had to obviously go through. If you really found this tutorial useful, then obviously you can join my Patreon, which is linked in the description. And if you have any problems that are not the ones that we just discussed, then you can join my Discord, which is linked in the description, and there will probably be someone there, probably me, to help you with those problems. So I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.